I welcome you to this FCA webinar, the Sunday breakfast session with TEE. The Forum of Cardiac Anesthesiologists was established in early 90s and it has become the Bangalore chapter of IATA. So under these aegis, we are conducting this TEE on Sundays and critical care cardiac anesthesia on Mondays. Please join us. Dr. Prabhu Shankar, who is the president, will say introductory words. Dr. Prabhu Shankar, can you hear me? Dr. Prabhu Shankar.
Good morning, good morning to all. I welcome today's breakfast sessions of today's echo class, and we have today's speaker is Dr. Murali sir, and topic is mitral valve anatomy, finding T of mitral valve and anatomy and various lesions of mitral valve. Dr. Murali sir, everybody knows that he needs no introduction. He's almost every alternate week is giving us class. Thank you, sir, for this. And over to Murali sir for enlightening us.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhu Shankar. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
And my slide is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning to one and all, ladies and gentlemen. In the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be dealing with mitral valve as relevant to transesophageal echocardiography. And I'll be covering only the salient features because it's a huge topic. And also I'm doing this more or less impromptu because somebody else was supposed to do it. Nevertheless, to keep the program going, I'm sharing you the whatever little I know about mitral valve with you. And there will be discussion at the end. Please feel to comment or question at the end of the session. Kindly keep all the mics muted till the end of the talk. All the mics and videos must be kept in the switch off mode. To start the topic, in the last 3 to 4 decades, there has been great advance in the management of patients with mitral valve disease. There is no doubt that TEE is a class 1 indication when we are attempting mitral valve repair. A mitral valve repair is unthinkable without the use of transesophageal echocardiography in the current era. In fact, the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association have clearly classified mitral valve repair as class 1 indication. Why should we know about mitral valve? This is because of the issue that by the year 2030, at least 20% of the individuals living in United States will be having valvular heart disease. 20%, just look at that, 20% of the individuals above 65 years will have significant valvular heart disease. And these statistics indicate the patients who are the population which is more than 85 vis-a-vis 65. So it's a problem of aging. And if you look at the mitral valve apparatus, it consists of 5 distinct anatomic structures. Starts with mitral valve annulus, the leaflets, chordae tendineae, papillary muscle, and adjacent myocardium. So these are the 5 components of mitral valve apparatus. I'll repeat it. We have the annulus, mitral annulus, the leaflet, the chordae tendineae, the papillary muscle, and adjacent myocardial muscle. It is important for us to recognize that any problem in any of one of these structures, be it annulus, leaflet, chordae, papillary muscle, or the myocardium, the mitral valve is likely to become incompetent, leading to mitral regurgitation and clinical symptoms. The mitral valve has, as you know, it's a bileaflet structure. Usually everything is two in this. There are two leaflets. This is a schematic representation. The anterior mitral leaflet and the posterior mitral leaflet are shown here. And you have anterolateral commissure and posteromedial commissure at the end of the leaflets. And as you can easily discern, the anterior mitral leaflet is larger when seen en face, and it is attached to 1/3 of the annulus of the mitral valve, whereas posterior leaflet looks thinner and it is attached to about 2/3 of the mitral valve annulus. It is in relation with the trigones, the left trigone and the right trigone, which is a fibrous. This form the fibrous layer, or you can call it the aortomitral curtain between the aortic valve and the mitral valve. And this intertrigonal distance is about 80% of the aortic annular size. If you take the aortic annular size and compare it with intertrigonal distance, it's about, the ratio is about 0.8. And the important thing we should remember is that the anterior leaflet is in close proximity with the non-coronary and left coronary cusps of the aortic valve. And you have the bundle of His and the circumflex artery is going around, and the coronary sinus is in close relation to the posterior rim of the mitral annulus. So these are the important structures which are in close proximity. To repeat, we have the aortic valve, especially the non-coronary and left coronary cusps, the two trigones, the bundle of His, the circumflex artery, the coronary sinus. The importance of this is that during surgery, any of these structures may be inadvertently involved. So as I already pointed out, there are two commissures, the anterolateral commissure and posteromedial commissure. And to the tip of the leaflets, we have the first degree chordae attached. And to the surface of the leaflet underneath, you have the second degree chordae. And the tertiary chordae are attached to the base of the myocardium here, just under the valve leaflet. This is necessary to provide stability for the mitral valve. As you are aware, mitral valve is not circular. It is an ellipsoid saddle-shaped fibrous ring. It has high points and low points. High points are seen in the mid-esophageal long axis view, whereas the low points are more towards the apex, and this is best seen in the mid-esophageal commissural view at 60 degrees. If you look at the anatomic view of the mitral valve is viewed from the base of the heart looking towards the LV apex. The position of the left, right, and non-coronary cusps are shown in relation to the anterior mitral leaflet. This is important for us to note that when we look at the long axis, mitral valve long axis, left ventricular long axis at 140 degrees, the leaflet of the aortic valve, which is in proximity to the anterior mitral leaflet, can be non-coronary or left coronary cusp. So this illustration is useful to understand that fact. Coming to the orientation of the mitral valve, when we look at the mitral valve using transesophageal echocardiography, in the basal short axis view, you get a cross section of the mitral valve. The anterior mitral leaflet is to the left and down, whereas the posterior mitral leaflet is the up and right side of the image on the screen. But if you look at the surgeon's view, it is exactly a bit opposite to this, which is necessary for us to understand, and surgeon's view is almost similar to the anatomic view. In the surgeon's view, the anterior mitral leaflet is above and posterior leaflet is above or below the field of vision. You have in the TE, we have the P1, P2, P3 from the lateral to the medial side, and A1, A2, A3 from lateral to the medial side. But in the surgeon's view, it is a bit different in the sense that the anterior mitral leaflet, the portions of the anterior mitral leaflet A1, A2, and A3 are seen in a sequence from left to right, and similarly P1, P2, P3 are seen down below. The same is illustrated here. If you look at the 3D pictures, where the aortic valve is brought into focus at 12 o'clock position, this you can see that the mitral valve anterior leaflet will be towards the upper side of the field of vision, where the posterior leaflet is below, and the A1, A2, A3, P1, P2, P3 will be sequentially seen as is shown in this schematic representation on the left side. Now coming to the TE views, we have two mid-esophageal views and two transgastric views, which are important for us to assess and evaluate the mitral valve function and structure. The first view is the mid-esophageal 4-chamber view. We have the left ventricle, right ventricle. The tricuspid valve is seen on the left side, the mitral valve here. Here you have the anterior mitral leaflet, posterior mitral leaflet, A2 segment and P2 segment are seen. Left atrium is seen high above in the near field. The probe is somewhere here and the multiplane angle is 0. So the A2 segment and P2 segment are seen, and you can see that the valve is coapting well and the both leaflets are mobile, and the thickness of the leaflet is between about 2 millimeters. Anything more than 4 millimeters will be considered thickening of the mitral leaflet, which we will deal with when we talk about mitral stenosis because of rheumatic heart disease. The second view to interrogate the mitral valve is the mid-esophageal commissural view. The multiplane angle is increased to about 40 to 60 degrees. When we do that, the right ventricle and the right atrium disappear. We have the left atrium, left ventricle. Then on the left side of the image, you get the P3 segment of the posterior mitral leaflet. And on the right side, you get the P1 segment, and in between you get the A2 segment. This is a commissural view in the sense that you see both the posteromedial and anterolateral commissures. And in patients who have mitral stenosis because of rheumatic heart disease, these commissures will be fused and you will not be able to see any gap between the P3 and A2 and P1 segments in this view. The next view is that of the 2-chamber view. The multiplane angle here is increased about 90 degrees. Here again you see the left atrium, left ventricle, and the P3 segment of the posterior mitral leaflet, and you will see the anterior mitral leaflet starting from the A2, A1, A2 and A3. And if you withdraw and adjust the probe a little bit, you will see the left atrial appendage here, which is very important in patients who have atrial fibrillation, be it mitral disease or ischemic heart disease. It is important for us to delineate the left atrial appendage to look for any clots. And just above that, you can visualize the left upper lobe pulmonary vein, which is useful to when we Doppler interrogate the left upper lobe pulmonary vein. That is useful in quantification of mitral regurgitation and also in the evaluation of diastolic dysfunction. So these are the important features or requirements from the mid-esophageal two-chamber view. The next view is the mid-esophageal long axis view. This is also called as LV long axis. The multiplane angle here is increased to about 120 to 140 degrees. Left atrium is seen in the near field, left ventricle here, interventricular septum, the right ventricle, the aortic valve. This is the right coronary cusp. This is the non-coronary or left coronary cusp, and you have the anterior mitral leaflet, posterior mitral leaflet. Posterior mitral leaflet is on the left side of the image, and by freezing the image, you can measure the mitral valve annulus and the lengths of the mitral leaflets. Anterior posterior mitral leaflet can be calculated by using the caliper function of the echocardiography machine. The next view is now we go on to the stomach, decrease the multiplane angle to about 0 and advance the probe into the stomach and anti-flex the probe, and you get the transgastric basal short axis view showing the anterior mitral leaflet and the posterior mitral leaflet. And this is the interventricular septum. On the left side, you get the right ventricle. And you have the anterolateral commissure and the posteromedial commissure seen in this. And here the mitral valve may look like fish mouth, and sometimes this is called fish mouth. And this view is important to determine the mitral valve area using planimetry. You freeze the image and then use the caliper, use the trace function and get the area of the mitral valve. And the normal mitral valve is 4 to 5 square centimeters. And any mitral valve area less than 2.5 may be labeled as mitral stenosis. And the mitral valve area 1 to 1.5 to 2.5 is mild. 1 to 1.5 square centimeters is moderate. Less than 1 is severe mitral stenosis. The next view is the transgastric two-chamber view. You increase the multiplane angle to about 90. You see the left atrium, left ventricle, and the mitral valve, the anterior mitral leaflet, posterior mitral leaflet. And the importance of this view is that the caudate tendineae and papillary muscles are very well visualized because of the fact that the echo beam is perpendicular to the structures we are examining. So the caudate tendineae and the papillary muscles can be easily seen, clearly visualized. You can see that here. And hence the importance of this view whenever you want to assess the subvalvular pathology. Having looked at the 6 views which are needed for mitral valve, we will just go into the 2 important lesions, that's the mitral stenosis and mitral regurgitation. Coming to mitral regurgitation, we should know that the mechanisms of mitral regurgitation is different from etiology. The etiology is the cause for the disease, and mechanism is how the mitral regurgitation is produced. Usually in our country, the mitral regurgitation commonest cause is the rheumatic heart disease. Second commonest is the ischemic heart disease, and you have other causes like fibroelastic disease, myxomatous degeneration, Marfan syndrome, etc. So, what are the mechanisms of mitral valve pathology? Typically, the Carpentier has classified the mechanisms of mitral regurgitation into 3 classes: type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 mitral regurgitation is the regurgitation which occurs when the mitral valve leaflet motion is normal. The leaflets are mobile and the motion is normal. And the leaflets are not crossing the annular plane of the mitral valve, and there is failure of coaptation, or there may be perforation or cleft in the mitral leaflet, but actually the mitral leaflet motion is normal. This is type 1, and you have type 2 mitral regurgitation where there is excessive leaflet motion. Here one or more than one leaflet, that is to both the leaflets, may be abnormal with a flail segment of the leaflet, or there may be billowing, and you may be actually having a flail segment. There is prolapse, billowing, flail of the mitral, one or more of the leaflets causing mitral regurgitation. And type 3 is type 3 mitral regurgitation is caused because of restricted leaflet motion. Restricted leaflet motion can occur in both phases of cardiac cycle, like systolic and diastolic, or it may be restricted only during systole. So that is the type 1. Type 3 restricted leaf motion can be seen in rheumatic heart disease and in ischemic heart disease. In rheumatic heart disease, the restriction is both during systole and diastole, whereas in ischemic heart disease, the restriction is restricted to systolic phase of the cardiac cycle. Currently, some authors have included type 4 and type 5 mitral valve regurgitation mechanisms. But for all practical purposes, as long as we remember first, second, and type 3, it is sufficient. A type 4 regurgitation occurs in patients who have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy as a result of systolic anti-motion of the mitral valve leaflet. The mitral valve is unable to close during systole. The anti-mitral leaflet is sucked into the LVOT, and there is failure of coaptation of mitral valve leaflets leading to mitral regurgitation. That is type 4. And type 5 is also sometimes called as pseudoprolapse, where the posterior mitral leaflet is immobile. Antemitral leaflet may just cross the annular plane and cause mitral regurgitation, and this is sometimes called as hybrid or pseudoprolapse. So this is diagrammatically it is represented here. We have the normal leaflet motion. This is the normal mitral valve with both the leaflets are coapting in the midline with a good coaptation distance, which is about 0.6 to 1 centimeter. And here on the right upper panel, you have the annular dilatation causing regurgitation, failure of coaptation leading to central mitral regurgitation. And in the left bottom panel, we have excessive movement. The posterior mitral leaflet is perhaps leading to mitral regurgitation. And in the last panel, we have the restricted mobility of the mitral valve leading to mitral regurgitation. When you come to the Doppler, you see if you put the color Doppler, there is turbulent flow from LV to LA in patients who have mitral regurgitation, and there is what is called as flow acceleration below the mitral valve. In mitral regurgitation, flow acceleration occurs on the left ventricular side of the mitral valve, and there is a formation of isovelocity shells. And by knowing the radius of the isovelocity shell or hemisphere, which is called proximal isovelocity surface area, the radius and area which we calculate, we can obtain the regurgitant orifice area. By applying color, we also can do the color mapping And also we can determine the vena contracta. Vena contracta is the narrowest portion of the mitral valve jet during systolic phase. And any mitral valve, any vena contracta greater than 7 millimeters is labeled as severe mitral regurgitation, and vena contracta is one of the most popular methods to determine the degree of severity of mitral regurgitation because it is not much influenced by the loading conditions. Whereas the jet area, when you look at the jet area, this is influenced by the left atrial compliance and the hemodynamic parameters. For example, after anesthetic induction, when the systemic vascular resistance decreases, the jet area may be underestimating the severity of mitral regurgitation. Similarly, the color flow settings on the machine will alter the jet area estimation. As a secondary effect of mitral regurgitation, there is left atrial dilatation and secondary effects on the pulmonary venous system. Coming to grading of mitral regurgitation, we are talking about chronic mitral regurgitation. If you talk about severe mitral regurgitation, you can identify the morphological lesion, whether it's a flail or ruptured papillary muscle, or there is tethering of the leaflet. LV and LA size are dilated. We are talking about severe, and proportionately lesser degree of the same parameter is seen in mild and moderate mitral regurgitation. The jet area is more than 50% of the left atrial area, and the flow convergence occurs throughout systole. The continuous wave Doppler jet will be dense. Vena contracta width is more than 0.7 centimeters. And in the pulmonary venous Doppler, when you put the pulse wave Doppler in the pulmonary vein, there is systolic flow reversal, which is normally the systole is seen in the upper region of the tracing, that is above the baseline. But in these patients, there is systolic flow reversal and you see the flow below the baseline in systole because the blood is going back from the left ventricle to the left atrium to the pulmonary vein. So there is reversal of flow in the pulmonary veins during systole. And the E wave is dominant if you look at the mitral inflow flow velocities. It's more than 1.2 meters per second. The effective regurgitant orifice area is greater than 0.4 centimeters square. This may be lower in patients who have functional mitral regurgitation, for example, those with ischemic heart disease. The residual, the regurgitant volume is more than 60 ml and the regurgitant fraction is greater than 50%. All this can be determined by using the Wiesa principle. This is the schematic representation showing the normal 3D picture. First is the schematic representation followed by 3D picture, and in patients who have mitral valve post PML indentation, you can see it in the en-face view, and patients who have cleft. In cleft, you can see a defect in the leaflet which is extending up to the annulus, whereas indentation it falls short of the annulus. The other thing about vena contracta is that vena contracta may not be elliptical and it may not be of the same size in different views. That is delineated in this picture. This is the 4-chamber view and this is the 2-chamber view. You look at the vena contracta width. This is smaller here and vena contracta is much wide here. And if you see the en-face view of the vena contracta in this particular image, you can see that it is not circular. It is a sort of ellipsoid or rectangular in shape. So these factors must be kept in mind, and hence when we look at the vena contracta, if in 2D, we should always look at the vena contracta in at least 2 different orthogonal views, and then decide upon the severity of the vena regurgitation rather than basing the conclusions on one single view. This is static systolic models of the mitral valve leaflets and annulus. Any portion which is shown in red is the one which is prolapsing, which is beyond the annular plane, and hence represents a sort of bellowing or prolapse depending upon the extent of the leaflet which is going to the left atrium. From volumetric 3-dimensional data sets, a number of measurements can be performed using QLab in Philips. And these are mentioned here: the anteroposterior annular diameter, anterolateral to posteromedial annular diameter, the tenting area, tenting height, etc. All these can be determined using multiplanar reconstruction of the 3-dimensional views. This is the ENFAS view of the mitral valve showing P2 prolapse here. Same thing is exhibited here. And in the next picture, we are seeing 3D zoom images of the mitral valve demonstrating perforation of the anterior mitral leaflet. And this is after the lesion has been taken care of by surgery, but suture has been put across the perforation, and this is the picture of the sutured perforation in a patient who has perforation of the anterior mitral leaflet. The evaluation of vena contracta with 3D echocardiography and multiplanar reconstruction, you can see that, as I said, the vena contracta may not be really circular. And this is a transilluminated image of the mitral valve. And when we look at the mitral valve during surgery, we need to evaluate pre-CPB and post-CPB. Having said that, the evaluation of mitral regurgitation in the intraoperative settings, there are unique challenges because of anesthesia, because the mitral regurgitation is underestimated under anesthetic conditions, and any assessment of the mitral valve for surgical purposes in otherwise stable patient must be done preoperatively in the outpatient department or in the street conditions to get the accurate picture of the mitral regurgitation. In the pre-CPB, we need to look at refine the preoperative assessment, confirm the etiology and mechanism. What should be the cannulation strategy? Are we doing a minimal access surgery, or is it a routine sternotomy mitral valve surgery? Is there a need to change the surgery plan? What is the cardiac function? What are the possible complications, especially in terms of prediction of systolic anterior motion? When we look at the cardiac functions, it's again important to note that in patients who have mitral regurgitation, the ejection fraction is overestimated in mitral regurgitation. Any ejection fraction less than 60% should be treated as impaired LV function in these patients. After CPB, what is the residual MR? Is there any gradient across the mitral valve because the mitral valve has been repaired? Is there any left circumflex obstruction? Is there a possibility of systolic anterior motion? What is the ventricular function, left versus right? And how are the other valves? Coming to mitral stenosis, this is a patient with mitral stenosis. You can see that the left atrium, left ventricle, the mitral valve, the anterior leaflet, A2 segment, posterior leaflet, P2 segment. You can see that the P2 segment is fixed. It's not moving. There is thickening of the valve leaflets and calcification of the tips of the leaflets. and the valve is not opening. And when you put the color Doppler, it is associated with eccentric mitral regurgitation. The treatment can be mitral replacement, where the valve is excised and the mitral valve is replaced, or in suitable patients, we can do the mitral valvotomy surgically. Here, I should also make a mention of the Wilkins score, which is used to assess the splittability in the catheterization lab. Splittability is calculated taking 4 factors into consideration. What is the thickness of the valve? What is the mobility of the valve? Is there any calcium deposits? Is it calcification? And then looking into the subvalvular apparatus. These are the 4 factors. I'll repeat. This is thickness, mobility, calcification, and subvalvular apparatus. All the 4 factors are considered. Each factor is given a score of 1 to 4, depending upon the mobility, thickness, calcification, and subvalvular fusion. And any value above 12 is considered to be not suitable for splitting. And any score less than 10 or 8 is considered to be suitable for splitting. And before we do the balloon valvulotomy, it is absolutely essential to rule out clots in the LA by doing a transesophageal echocardiography in the outpatient department. And patients who have LA thrombus are relatively contraindicated for balloon valvuloplasty. Coming to regurgitation, you have the anterior wall, anterior leaflet. This is PML prolapse. P2 segment is prolapsed, and here what has been done is this is a surgical picture of the P2 prolapse, and quadrangular resection has been done here. And as per the recommendation, any mitral valve repair procedure surgically done is accompanied by a mitral valve ring to stabilize the annulus. This is a patient with AML prolapse. The jet is directed posteriorly. Here, the artificial cords are attached to make the anterior mitral leaflet competent. And again, a ring is inserted to stabilize the mitral valve. The annular measurements which are necessary in patients, especially with functional MR, include the anterior tenting angle, the anterior leaflet tenting angle, posterior leaflet tenting angle, anterior leaflet bending angle, anterior leaflet bending angle, and coaptation length. This is the coaptation length. Then tenting height and tenting area. All these parameters are taken to assess the possibility of repair if the tenting area is greater than 2.5 square centimeters or the tenting height is greater than 1 centimeter. These cases may not have successful outcome after repair of the mitral valve. The next thing is about predictors of systolic anterior motion. These one of the there have been several predictors. One of the important one is the C-sep distance, that is the distance between the coaptation point to the interventricular septum. What is the degree of septal bulge? And the angle between the aortic and the mitral valve planes. If it is less than 120 degrees, it may be a predictor for SAM, and also the ratio of the lengths of the posterior mitral leaflet and anterior mitral leaflet. If the posterior mitral leaflet is longer than the anterior mitral, equal to or longer than the anterior mitral leaflet, this coaptation is likely to occur closer to the LVOT, and hence these patients are likely to have systolic anterior motion at the end of bypass. Same thing is shown here. Some of the complications of mitral valve repair is shown here. You have the air in the cardiac chambers, residual mitral regurgitation, systolic anterior motion of the mitral valve, and then you have residual gradient, mitral stenosis like picture here with gradient across the mitral valve, and regional wall motion abnormalities as a result of injury to the circumflex artery may all be seen. These are the valves which are not suitable for repair, where there is, in essence, there is no absolute contraindication for repair, but presence of extensive infection and extensive leaflet damage, especially in patients, those patients that have infective endocarditis, and some of the bad rheumatic valve heart disease with rheumatic valve, patients who have annular calcification. These are some of the relative contra or absolute or relative contraindications for the reparative procedures. In the interventional lab, we can do what is the mitral clip procedure, which is done under TEE guidance. You enter the right atrium and do a septal puncture, go to the left atrium, and then across the mitral valve, deploy a clip between the two leaflets. It is similar to what is done in the surgical Alfieri stitch. The two leaflets are stitched together in the middle to give a figure of 8 picture on the TEE. Same thing is done interventionally using mitral clip, and there are about as many as 10,000 procedures have been done worldwide with symptomatic and functional class improvement in these patients. This is offered to patients who are sick and elderly, where the operative procedure carries a high risk. So this has been offered as a palliative procedure with gratifying results. And if you look at the transilluminated picture of the mitral valve after mitral clip, it will look like this. This is the clip. This is the TE image which has been subjected to transillumination. You can actually see the mitral orifice. There are 2 orifices here. And you can also use what is called a Pascal device to repair the mitral valve. And then you have beating heart mitral valve repair procedures. This is one. The device is inserted through the apex using transducible echocardiographic guidance. Mitral valve is stabilized. The mitral leaflet is stabilized and then stitched to the apex of the valve, apex of the left ventricle, leading to decrease in the mitral regurgitation. This is being done in Europe in very successful manner. There you do not need CPB, only patient is given anesthesia and under general anesthetic cover, the anti guidance, the mitral regurgitation is reduced. The transcatheter mitral valve replacement is also being performed with good impressions and good results. And here we are showing the transilluminated pictures of mitral valve in comparison 3D. Here the P2 segment is flail. You can see that here P2 segment is flail. This is the anterior mitral leaflet. The posterior mitral leaflet, P2 segment. This is the transilluminated picture. And in the next picture, we are showing ruptured chordae tendineae. No, this is a valve prosthesis with paravalvular leak. This is the leaking area. You can see the valve, mechanical valve and paravalvular leak is seen. And this is a patient with perforation of the P3 segment, which is clearly seen here. And the ruptured chordae, you can see it's floating here. This is the ruptured chordae. Same is seen here. In conclusion, the management goal is to preserve the valve function as far as possible. Integrated assessment using 2D, 3D is key for success of repair. Collaborative decision making is essential. What are the preoperative findings? What are the intraoperative findings? Discussion with the operating surgeon is essential for successful outcome. Ejection fraction in mitral regurgitation is underestimated under anesthetized conditions. Ejection fraction MR is misleading because it is overestimated, and MR under anesthesia may be underestimated. Advances in minimally invasive beating heart percutaneous transcatheter techniques are likely to become good options for mitral valve repair in the near future. And also the use of artificial intelligence will aid the clinician to make correct decisions at the right time. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer it.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Thank you, sir, for
Yeah, I can hear.
Excellent explanation rather than presentation to us.
Yes.
Presentation is much more higher, sir. The thing is, till now we were not knowing the carpenters class 4 and 5. Thank you for explaining that, sir. My question is, in assessing the MR, eccentric jet also to be counted, or only the two?
Very nice question. Very nice question. All the eccentric jets are
because
considered.
You told the diameter is enough, but in present, just by looking only, we can make out the severity of MR, or you have to calculate and this one, sir. See,
all the eccentric jets are considered to be severe unless otherwise proved. Okay. So if there's an eccentric jet, just you can straight away say that it is severe.
Okay. Other question is, you told the criteria for mitral regurgitation for this one surgery, sir. The tenting, everything. Yeah. In case of ischemic MR and other connective tissue disorder MR, the criteria holds the same or any different is there, sir?
This is particularly applicable to functional MR because of ischemic heart disease.
Okay.
In myxomatous and other lesions, it depends upon the quality of the valve and what are the segments involved. Those things will be taken into consideration.
Okay. And after post repair status, what are the criteria successful this one completion of the surgery repair, successful repair? Successful repair,
the assessment in the post CPB, when you are achieved the good hemodynamic status.
Okay.
The blood pressure must be at least 100 to 120 millimeters. Sometimes in a hurry, if you are trying to reassess the valve when the pressure is actually low, for example, 80 or 60, okay, you will be grossly underestimating the quantity of mitral regurgitation. So this blood pressure should be normalized. And then you can use the usual parameters, jet area, vena contracta, to assess the presence or absence of mitral regurgitation. Anything more than moderate, mild, anything more than mild must be addressed straight away in consultation with the surgeon. A whiff of MR or the small degree of mild MR may be acceptable.
When to address SAM, sir? Up to what is it? You can allow medical line of management and when to address?
Yeah, the systolic anti-motion is a significant problem with the incidence was quoted to be between 60 to 16% in the previous era, previous decade or so, but now the incidence is much less because of the greater understanding of the pathophysiology. The use of inotropes and maintenance the use of inotropes is one of the predisposing factors. Of course, the anatomical configuration of the left frontal outflow tract in relation to the mitral valve apparatus has to be assessed pre-bypass to be able to predict the occurrence of possible SAM, and the SAM, if it occurs, must be treated with volume loading, decreasing the inotropes, use of alpha agonists, and if necessary, use of beta blockers. And if this is the medical treatment, and if this does not result in significant improvement, or the patient continues to be in low output state and significant mitral regurgitation and LVOT obstruction, in rare cases, you might have to reinstitute the bypass and then redo the mitral valve repair.
Thank you, sir. Any question, please? Any doubt or anything?
Good morning, sir. So, which view is the best one to tell about A1, A2, A3, and P1, P2, P3 intraoperatively? Means the surgeon has not just gone on bypass, and he just wants guidance that if there is a
good question. Very good question. It depends upon whether you have 2D or 3D. If you have 3D, you can show him the basal short axis, or what is called as the en-face view of the mitral valve, where whole mitral valve can be visualized. The anterior, posterior leaflets, and all the segments A1, A2, A3, P1, P2, P3, all the 6 segments can be visualized in one go, keeping the aortic valve at the 12 o'clock position. Because that is the surgeon's view. It is very easy for the surgeon to understand where is the lesion. This is if you are using 3D. But if you do not have 3D, 2D is also reasonably good enough. And actually, as of now, there is no recommendation that 3D is mandatory for these patients. So if you have a good quality 2D image, if you are looking at the multiple views, it is very important to see the multiple views. All the 6 views must be visualized. And then in the mid-esophageal window, you can get the 4-chamber view. If you withdraw the probe, you can get the A1, P1 segments. If you advance the probe beyond the mid-esophageal window, routine mid-esophageal window, you can get the P3 and A3 segments. And in the routine mid-esophageal 4-chamber, you get the A2, P2. So you can see sequentially all the 6 leaflets, or you can look at the other views. For example, the commissural view to look at the P3, P1, A2, and the 2-chamber view to see the entire entry mitral leaflet and P3 segment. And in the long axis view, again, you can see the P2 and A2, and by turning the probe to the right or left at the same position, you also can see the other segment of the anterior and posterior mitral leaflet. So you have to look at all the views to make a comprehensive diagnosis and make a educated guess or educated diagnosis of the completeness of the mitral valve assessment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I am Dr. V. Kumar from Delhi, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, the surgeons also do the test, saline test, to after the procedure surgery to check whether the regurgitation is still there or no. So is
Yes.
it after that we do the echo also? So which which one is more reliable, because sometimes we don't have TE also.
The saline test which is done at the end of mitral valve repair is reasonably good. It is reasonably good if the leaflets are holding the water within the left ventricle at that particular pressure, whatever pressure the surgeon uses, which may be, I don't know what the pressure, it may be 60 or 80. And if mitral valve is holding It's a reasonable way to do it. Actually, it is routinely practiced in most centers, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the technique. It is the only practical technique where, because the heart is flaccid, you cannot make the heart beat that time, and you want to make a judgment of adequacy of the repair, and that is, I would think that it is reasonable to do that. Absolutely no problem.
The pressure is, sir, approximate pressure, it seems, in the LV, that ventricle.
Yeah, I think it should be 60 to 80 millimeters.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Maybe if we can study that, what is the pressure there, and see what is the mean pressure.
If the fluid is coming, the saline is coming from the other side, then they suspect, yes, it is adequate. From the other port, they also put one port coming out, the saline is coming out from the other side. And if it starts coming from the other side, then they, after filling of the LV, then they presume it is adequate.
Yeah, one of the LV is filled with saline, and the mitral valve looks competent. If fluid is not coming out, it indicates that the valve repair is good. When pseudoprolapse is there, restricted PML, both will have posterior directed MR jet due to differentiation of posterior. See, this is any patient who has restricted PML motion, there will be some degree of prolapse, some degree of regurgitation, and if you see that the antemitral leaflet is not coapting with the PML, and it looks as if it is prolapsing with the LA, that is the pseudoprolapse. That will be called as pseudoprolapse. If the antemitral leaflet is moving reasonably well, and it is not touching the PML and goes towards the LA, that will be the pseudoprolapse. The jet will be directed posteriorly, as you correctly said.
Sir, there is one question in the chat box, sir.
Yes. This is about pseudoprolapse, no? That's what I replied just now.
Yes, sir.
Is there any other question?
As of now, sir, there is no question, sir.
If there are none, can I request Prabhu Shankar to take over and concluding remarks?
Yes, sir. I thank Murali sir for his wonderful presentation and explanation, especially the anatomy and various pathological features of mitral valve. It may be mitral stenosis or MR, especially MR, and the various classification. I thank you, sir, for wonderful presentation. I welcome. I also thanks Rajiv and everybody who helped. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow at 6:45 in the evening.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Happy Sunday.
Thank you, sir.